Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Double Tap on YouTube. I'm Stephen Scott.
And I'm Shaun Preece. Hello.
Hello. Shaun, I think today we should do something that I'm told on YouTube is a bit of a no-no. It's a bit of a moment.
Are you sure?
No, it's all right. We're not going down that road. I mean, don't get me wrong. If it gets the numbers up, I'll consider it. But I think somehow it won't go the way that the bosses think. Certainly not going to bring in any money, I'll tell you that. We're going to delve into the comments because we get so many comments in all these different videos.
Ooh.
Yeah. Don't
Dangerous.
worry. No,
Dangerous.
it's fine. Look,
I am nervous.
No, don't be. And I'll tell you why. Because we are nowhere near famous in any way. So, we're not being targeted by the trolls. It's not a Dell sitting here, right? It's a Dell computer that's sitting here. That's what we've got in front of us right
well
now.
Done. That old joke made it in.
I might even applaud myself on that one, actually. I think I might. I can't imagine the comments after this video. But let's get into some of the comments. So this is following a number of different episodes. The first one I'm going to talk about is, remember the Getting the Best Signal episode we did? It's where you and I talked about you changing Wi-Fi provider and also getting, Wi-Fi internet provider and getting a new Wi-Fi system, a new mesh system into the house. Remember that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I have the Orbi and I got the new Google 6E Pro mesh system, something like
Catchy.
that. Yes,
yeah,
I know.
Well, Tim Dixon writes, great conversation. I have an old BT whole home Wi-Fi disk setup that I have Ethernet plugged into each to ensure best performance. It's a bit long in the tooth now and due an upgrade. My wife says very similar as well, but for different reasons. Anyway, he goes on to say, I use a PF Sense firewall, but it's falling out of support and needs replacing. I'm on the lookout for my next setup. He says the Eeros from Amazon are appealing for the lower cost and ease, but I'm also tempted by ubiquity and the ability to use the Ethernet to power them rather than power cables themselves, which is kind of cool. That means, he says, I could use a UPS. That's an uninterruptible power supply, I think, centrally to keep all the Wi-Fi up in an outage. I should say he knows what a UPS is. I was just trying to work out what it meant for me. Yeah, I mean, look, a lot in there. I mean, Eero from Amazon, that's what I have, and I love them. They are very good, and they do seem to do the job. It's one of those things that, in theory, if it's good enough, you'll forget it's there. That's the point, right? It should just work.
That's what you want, yeah. Set and forget, I believe they call it. Well, firstly, I mean, I'm resisting the urge to shout out "nerd" because you got your system set up really nicely there, and when it comes down to which system you get next, you mentioned ubiquity, which is very much, I would say, it's almost prosumer. That's very high end, and you do pay a price for that. But then that is exactly what you're talking about, Stephen, set and forget. But probably for most people, the Eero system, the Google Nest mesh system, Orbi, anything like that is going to be more than enough. But it does seem like everything you get now is going to be a mesh system anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to also bring in Greg Hayes' comment on this. He sent in this voicemail to us.
Stephen, Shaun, this is Greg from Phoenix. I was just watching your YouTube video about connectivity. Shaun, I have a feeling this is not going to be easy, but I think the only way you're going to get proper speed to your shed is to get that Ethernet cable all the way back to the main unit where your fiber coming in is. If you're connecting Ethernet to one of the mesh routers, unfortunately, you're going to get the speed of the Wi-Fi between the two mesh routers is going to slow you down, and then you've got the Ethernet going out from there. So again, I'm sure it's not simple, and getting cable all the way back to that main box might be difficult, but that's the only way you're going to get proper Ethernet speeds to your shed. Keep up the good work, guys. Love your YouTube and your podcasts every day. Bye.
Thank you, Greg. Don't you do that? Are you saying? Were you saying before that you were actually taking the connection from your shed, so that Ethernet cable you've got connected in your shed, back to the house and then into a mesh router or one of the mesh boxes?
Yeah, that's right. So the main router where the internet comes into my house is by the front door. and then it's connected wirelessly to a satellite router in the living room, which is what I connect this shed to via an Ethernet cable. So it's a cable to a satellite and a wireless connection to the main router. And Greg is absolutely right. And that is the issue I was running into.
Sorry, let me just clarify. Greg is absolutely right. You're an idiot.
But no. Wait, though. The Google Nest system, that Wi-Fi connection between the main router and the satellite wasn't strong enough. I was losing a lot of speed. But I swapped that out for the Netgear Orbi mesh system, and I get full speed, even with that wireless step in there. So it does depend on the system. The Google Nests are a great Wi-Fi system. I still have them up and running because all the family, everyone else upstairs, it all works fine for them. So
you get every possible combination going.
Well, the thing is that they are a lot smaller, and the Wi-Fi signal isn't quite as strong. The Netgear Orbi, my partner absolutely hates them because they're ugly, look like massive shoe boxes. But the fact is that they pump out a really strong Wi-Fi signal, which means I get full speed Ethernet through that Wi-Fi step to the shed out here. So you are right, but it does depend on the router.
Okay, all right. Well, I think Greg was correct. But
no, he's absolutely correct.
If it's working for you, then fine, right? That's the point. It has, as long as it works for you.
And I have no choice. Let's not forget, I did mention I have a partner, and the chances of me digging up the floorboards and running an Ethernet cable around are 0. So this is my only choice, but it does work.
Yeah, there's no answer to that I can give, because to be honest, I completely know where you're going with that. I want to argue with you, but I'm finding it difficult. That's logical. That's logical thought.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Greg. Appreciate the voicemail. And if you do wish to leave us a voicemail, you can. It's 1-877-803-4567. I did not nearly forget that number.
No, you didn't. Well, no one noticed.
1-877-803-4567 is the number. Now, listen, Raz writes in following an episode which is something I've been saying for a little while now, which is enough with the robot guide dogs. Okay, That was the title of the episode. It's also something I've been saying. Raz writes, oh man, yes to all of this. I keep seeing these places bringing back the robot guide dog, and every time I can't help but think that they have never talked to a dog handler. I don't want a crappy metal box that only works in very limited conditions and was designed by people who have no idea about the history and real work my dogs do for me. And that's before the cost, which so many of these companies don't seem to understand, that the blind community has a very high unemployment rate still, and we're practically forced to live in poverty. So how do they think we'll get the money for this thing or pay for a subscription? And it's the same trouble with the canes they keep trying to build from the ground up, when it's clear they don't know how very well engineered our canes really are. What we want and need are things like web accessibility that's actually enforced. Or I would be pretty happy with a braille display that a human being could afford and which can read EPUBs. Haha. I struggle to argue with that.
You can't argue with any of those points. He's absolutely right. It almost seems like every couple of years I hear about the new robot guide dog, whether it's in the form of a suitcase you can hold on to that will guide you around, or whatever, an actual robot guide dog. But do these ever see the light of day in a practical sense? So far, not. That doesn't mean we shouldn't look into it in the research, but I think he's absolutely right.
I think the technology is moving along. I think that, clearly there's a desire to create this. Whether there's a need for it or a want for it, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I've not met anybody who said, goodness me, I wish I could get Apple Music on my cane. So, if there's that person out there, then let me know. I think innovation is good, and I think we should always encourage it. But I think we also need to, and my point is always the same, which is we've got to make sure disabled people are in the room when these things are being discussed. Because what we don't want is for a developer to go and create something to then have a situation where 7 or 8 months later, the product comes to market and no one buys it. And the developer says, but I made this for you blind people and you don't want it. No, because no one asked for it. So you've got to have a conversation. You've got to have a conversation. But we'll always be interested in engaging. But what we will not be are beta testers at the tune of $1,000 every time. Not doing it. Just not doing it.
You're right. Absolutely.
Simon writes as well, he wrote a comment on this. He says, I definitely agree that the actual users need to be consulted more before the products become available. And especially with things like Zoom, Teams, or things like that, it would be a lot easier to do, but still does not appear to be being done. Talking, of course, about web accessibility and all of that again. I would definitely be interested in a device that genuinely met my needs. I have to say that I am probably one of the more demanding people, as I have no sense of direction, get lost super easily, so really need pinpoint accuracy guidance. So, yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, actually. And you're not alone in that. I mean,
I'm exactly the same.
I'm not pointing at Shaun, but I'm pointing at Shaun.
Yes, I get lost so easily. I get lost on the pavement, on the sidewalk. It's so easy to get disorientated. So, look, the point is, if there's any of this tech that makes our lives easier, then absolutely, of course, we're not going to say, oh, no, I don't want that. I want to stay with the traditional ways. But the fact of the matter is that there's no proven technology out there so far that really cuts it in terms of replacing a guide dog or a cane, or even adding to it, making the experience better. I haven't found that yet.
Josh writes, you said that the answer to allergies is the white cane. Of course, I was talking about dogs, and many people have got allergies. So that, means that, oftentimes a guide dog will not be suitable to someone, and the white cane therefore would be. That certainly is the case today, Josh. But he goes on to say, you forgot to mention the other answer to allergies can be guide horses. Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Factually, that's true. Practical wise, I'm not entirely sure. No, they are a thing, and they do exist. And I think even here in the UK, I know of one or maybe two people that use a guide horse because a dog just isn't appropriate. But there is a lot of practical things. I'm not sure how many people could make use of a guide horse.
Yeah, well, Ibrahim writes, does anybody know about any guide dog schools in the USA? I can't find any information about them. Thank you. I'm going to put that out to you guys because I have no idea. I honestly don't know about, especially in the USA, although it's something we're going to be talking about soon on the show. Not so much guide dog schools, or guide horse schools, I guess you would say, but something we will be definitely covering on a future Double Tap, so stay tuned for that. Now, another video that came up, you remember I talked about, the video was called A Plea to a Startup, and I was talking about the FreeWrite Alpha, and various other devices as well that are essentially typewriters, modern day typewriters. They have e-ink screens on them instead of paper coming out of them. They are e-ink screens. You can essentially work on them. The working title, I think, or the working phrase these days is distraction-free devices. You're not going to get an email pop-up. It's not going to, give you a FaceTime call right in the middle of it, as oftentimes is the case. In fact, it just happened to me right there. Someone calls me right in the middle of a recording. That's what happens, right? So, that's a bit of a nuisance. But the question is, how accessible were these devices? And the answer is not very. There's no audio output from them, so I can't get a screen reader in there. And that's something that really bothered me. I know that you're a little bit dismissive of this, but Matt writes in, and I think you might agree with this. He says, seriously? It's a typewriter. Typewriters have never had audio output. If you want audio output, buy a laptop. You can get one cheaper than the FreeWrite anyway. Or get a Fire tablet that you can dictate to and it will read your words back to you. Every device cannot be accessible.
Ooh, controversial. But yeah, I tend to agree. I'm just not sure of this particular device, what do you call it, genre, is going to take off. I mean, basically, we're talking about Bluetooth keyboards you can type on and remembers what you typed. This is a QWERTY note taker, if you want. Unless this is almost a throwaway price tag, I can't see this taking off when you can pick up a laptop for a few $100s.
We also talked on a recent episode about gaming consoles, and the title was, Is It Time to Buy a Gaming Console? You and I discussed the value, considering so many more accessible games are coming out, which is great. And Dan writes in, my last console was a PS3, which I only played a few games on. I lost the rest of my vision fairly rapidly, where I couldn't play them much except the Soul Calibur titles. I knew them so well, I could play them with very little vision. I would like this I would like to add that this experience of playing that game without vision was very different, but I eventually learned a new way to enjoy it. It wasn't the same, but it is possible. I suspect if I actually had in-game support for non-visual play, that I would have found similar levels of enjoyment and engagement. Yeah, I think that the question is, can we really enjoy these games without sight? These are visual experiences, and yes, there are audible components being added to them, be it a screen reader or be it a voiceover, an audio description, whatever it might be.
Audio cues,
all of that. Does it allow us? I think that there's two parts to this. One is, can it give us the same experience, and should it? It absolutely should. And I think for people who want to play these games, they should have the right. We should be able to play these games. Of course we should. Why shouldn't we? The person who just said, not everything can be accessible. Well, I disagree. I think we should try and consider that at all turns. Now, it may not be possible for some things. I mean, Grand Theft Auto 6 is coming out soon. I would love to play that game. Yes. But I think it's highly unlikely that I'm going to get a huge amount out of it. But I'd like to be proved wrong, or I'd like them to try and figure it out. So I think it's about the trial, really, isn't it? It's about trying to make it accessible. I do agree to some degree not everything can be, because I've talked recently about the Apple Vision Pro not being, needing to be accessible was my argument. And
disgraceful.
I think we've got comments coming up on that as well.
Well, the thing is, I think I tend to think that not everything can be fully accessible. But the trouble is, if you come at it that mindset, it means you never try. Who thought the touchscreen could ever be accessible? And the fact of the matter is, it totally is, right? But back in the day, I would have said, no, you can't have that being accessible. So I suppose it comes down to that for games as well. And you mentioned GTA 6. Absolutely, I totally agree. I'd love to play that. But would it be the same experience as I remember when I used to play GTA back in the day, when I was able to see it with low vision? That's the thing I can't quite get my head around, that it's the same experience.
You got me thinking, though, because you just said there, you never thought the touchscreen experience would work for you. And I guess everything we say that follows that has been answered. We can use a touchscreen. Is the experience the same using an iPhone with speech to using it visually? I'd say that it's different.
Yes.
And it's similar. And maybe that's where we need to get to. Maybe that's the answer. I think you may have solved the world's problems, Shaun Preece.
Not for the first time. You're welcome.
Excellent. Well done. Well, let's move on. Can you really understand blindness by pretending? This was the video, if you remember, we talked about those sim specs that do the rounds. And James Rath, the blind filmmaker, did a video with iJustine, the YouTuber. And he was showing her not just how to use technology to simulate vision problems, but also to go one step further than that, to actually show her how to do things. And I was quite intrigued by watching her try out, for example, using voiceover and showing her the challenge of that. But actually, showing her a positive experience, showing her that she could use technology. And my argument was, I think this is a good thing if it's being used in that way, but just to simulate vision loss, when the stats tell us that, more people who try this tend to come away with a more negative attitude towards visual impairment. We need less of that in the world. So that was the thread behind the conversation. And Aoife writes in, great conversation on a very interesting topic. Completely agree that persons with lived experience have to be involved. I find it gives deeper understanding when undertaken correctly. And that's the other point. You've got to get some blind people in the room when you're doing this kind of thing. It can't just be someone who's sighted telling a bunch of sighted people, here's what being blind is like. That just doesn't marry up with anything. I've said this a million times. Take the word blind out and put any other word you can think of in, and it will not make sense as a sentence. So I think that blind people, disabled people have to be part of that conversation as well.
Well, it's something we keep coming back to no matter what the topic is. The blind people do, or whatever disability that you happen to be talking about or looking into, then that person with that disability needs to be in that conversation, no matter what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your comments. I can only imagine there'll be one or two that follow this. Keep that conversation coming. We'll do this again soon because that's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for being with me again, Shaun. We'll do this again soon, and we'll catch you guys on another Double Tap on YouTube.
Thank you. Bye-bye.